A wave of strikes targeting the world's lifeline for oil. How is President Trump adapting? I'm Dana Bash. Let's go behind the headlines and inside politics. It is day 11 of the war in Iran. Public support is low. Gas prices are high. These two political realities are deeply connected. And this morning, President Trump is signaling again that he wants to bring the war to a quick conclusion. In a new interview with CNN analyst Barak Ravid of Axios, the president said that there's, quote, practically nothing left to target. He went on to say, quote, little this and that. Anytime I want it to end, it will end. These new comments add to the mixed administration messaging that keeps bouncing between the war is over and it's just beginning. Today, at least 3 ships were struck near the Strait of Hormuz. Iran claimed responsibility for 2 of the attacks. It is a new, vivid warning about Iran's ability to choke off global oil supply. Sources tell CNN Iran is laying mines in the crucial waterways responsible for moving 20% of the world's crude oil. I'm joined by a terrific group of reporters here today. Jeff Zeleny, I want to start with the political moment that we're in right now.
Look, I mean, President Trump campaigned and really arose to power against everything that we are seeing. And that is the beginning of his political challenge here. He campaigned against forever wars. He campaigned against the idea of this intervention in a way that supplants the America First thing. So now Republicans are left sort of scrambling to try and catch up and explain what is actually going on. And really by the day, sometimes hour by hour, he's losing some support of key voices like Joe Rogan, for example, yesterday, who was very supportive of the president, raising serious questions about what the U.S. is doing there. And I think part of that is because President Trump still has really yet to explain in a coherent, consistent view what the objectives are here. They've sort of been all over the map, when it's going to end, when it's not, what the objectives are. So, and the administration also clearly is not necessarily helping him. I mean, it's so striking the degree to which the cabinet secretaries, for example, have been not necessarily consistent with their comments either. Like the energy secretary, for example, Chris Wright, as the New York Times reported this morning, and we've reported as well. I mean, he was essentially sending the signal that the gas prices, the oil prices, that's not going to be an issue here. Well, look, it absolutely is an issue here. So it is, even the cabinet did not appear prepared for what was to come.
Yeah, and of course, part of the challenge that this cabinet has is following the bouncing ball, and the bouncing ball seems to be what the president is saying and what his message is, never mind the actions, at any given moment. Our colleague David Goldman has terrific analysis on CNN.com this morning. The headline of the story is Trump can't taco out of the Iran war's oil price shock. And he is talking about several realities here. Been talking to analysts. It could take a week or two to fully restore production, a bottleneck for a month or longer, returning the Strait of Hormuz to typical traffic could take 1 to 3 months. And these are conversations that he's had with various commodities experts and analysts.
And I mean, there is nothing that Americans are more sensitive to right now than gas prices and affordability in general. I mean, this is such a massive headache for the Trump administration in an election year. And it seems as though they really didn't expect there to be this amount of meddling that we're starting to see, in this aggressive pushback from Iran. And I don't know, I don't think any of us know at this moment whether whatever however quickly they're promising to make things go back to normal could actually happen. I mean, it's all uncertain, and that's going to really rattle Americans who are already not in support of this war.
And despite the bravado from the president, which he tends to do and feels like he needs to do to try to calm things down. What are you hearing from your Trump sources behind the scenes?
He doesn't have an appetite for a long-term war, at least according to my sources that I've talked to. He's looking for ways to sort of message, we've done this, we've done that, now it's time to leave, right? The question is, as Maeve said, how much of that can he control, right? If he says, we're out of here, and then let's say the Iranians keep attacking with the missiles or the drones that they have left, what does a president do? I mean, the president has a lot of power. He's obviously, in a lot of ways, the most powerful figure in the world, but he can't control everything, right? And some of these things are beyond his control, but he wants to get out at some point. If he watches the markets closely, you see when he makes comments, when he wants the markets to sort of to go back up. He watches the markets closely, he watches oil prices closely, he watches the MAGA supporters closely. I mean, Joe Rogan, I can quite tell you, the president notices that. He's watching voices, he's watching polling in his party, he's watching the midterms. And I don't think he has an appetite for a long-term sustained conflict with Iran, at least according to what I'm told by folks inside the White House.
And if you just look at the messaging from the people in the White House, I mean, I know Josh and everyone else are privy to these conversations too with White House officials, but for the last 6 months, when we're talking about the economy, they would both publicly and privately tout gas numbers, making up saying that these figures were down to $2, $1.99 in some cases across the country, saying that even if some of the issues that they ran on weren't exactly where they wanted to be, of course, blaming the Biden administration, gas prices were exactly there. You're not hearing that either in public or private when you talk to these officials. They're saying it's a temporary pause. They're saying just wait. They're saying this pain is worth it. But the question is whether or not the American people feel that the pain is worth it. And I think you're seeing those polls, which the White House is seeing too, by the way, that show that American people right now don't feel like it's worth it.
And just back to the economic pain and what it stems from, which is first and foremost from the Strait of Hormuz, where so much of the world's oil sort of goes through. Senator Chris Murphy posted on social media, the Strait of Hormuz, they had no plan. He said, suffice it to say, right now, they don't know how to get it safely back open. Senator Rick Scott, you mentioned the way that Republicans are trying to respond to this. Senator Rick Scott had some kind of response to this. At least they're trying to figure out how to navigate it. Here's an example.
So, I mean, we all want gas prices to come down. Nobody wants gas prices higher. This president doesn't want gas prices higher. But we have to be realistic. If you believe that Iran was going to use nuclear weapons against us, we had no choice but to do this. And there are problems short term.
I mean, there was an if in there, if you believe Iran. I mean, so that is still, I guess, back to the fundamental thing that President Trump did not prepare the nation for what was to come. I mean, so in every conflict and war that we have seen in our lifetimes covering this as reporters, and certainly in recent history, there's largely a public support, at least at the very beginning. I mean, obviously, as it wanes on, it's not. But that's what's sort of different about this. There was no predicate laid for it. But I'm hearing from some farm state senators, some red Republican members who are hearing from their districts as spring planting is beginning with farming and things. The cost of fertilizer, for example, through the roof. So that is going to be another sort of issue in places where Republicans were hoping to hold ground in the midterm.
I love when Nebraska's Jeff Zeleny comes through with his experience growing up on a farm.
It's true. I've heard it from two senators. They're really worried about it.
No, I'm not. I don't mean to belittle it, but you know what you're talking about. You literally did grow up on a farm.
To your point, the presidents always have to do a lot of things at the same time, but this president at times doesn't seem. I mean, he launches a war and then he goes to a MAGA fundraiser where he polls everyone in the room. Do you think it should be J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio? That's what he does that first weekend. He's done college football events. He goes in the White House and he's talking about the ballroom. I mean, I'm not saying he's not focused on the war. I'm just saying he has so many other things that he's talking to people about, and they don't seem to be making as aggressive as a case as you might think to the public of why you should support the war. He's doing all sorts of other things. I mean, he spent 2 hours on Friday afternoon at the college sports NIL roundtable. He had all these celebrities. He's talking to them. I'm not saying the president couldn't weigh in on that. A lot of people care about college sports, but I mean, it's sort of discordant from what's going on in the world.
Which is why, real quick, I do want to play Josh Hawley talking about, maybe saying out loud what a lot of these Republicans are saying privately about what should happen.
I thought the president's remarks last night that he could declare victory today and it would be a 100% victory, I think it's true. I think we ought to say to our heroes, thank you for a job well done. This has been absolutely amazing. It's been astounding. It's been historic. And now it's time to declare victory.
And interestingly enough, you heard the president in that interview with Barack kind of parrot that language, saying that we basically hit everything we can hit except for ins and outs. Now, I think maybe the American people are wondering what those small little things are, and maybe people